What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of the Underrated and Overlooked podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Najeh, and this is Craig Sager right here, right beside me. So we got a lot to talk about today. A little bit of a later starter time. We just started about 12, but in a special edition, we got a lot to talk about. This recruiting news, college football, Clemson suing officially the ACC, so it might be doomsday for them. And then talking a little about free agency. But before we start, Craig, how you feeling today?
Feeling good. Ready to roll.
All right, well, let's roll. Um, First off, before we even start with the news I want to hit, was there anything specific you seen on the high school circuit that you wanted to talk about before we get into it? It's not to you.
Oh, well, it's going to relate to one of our other topics, but Bruce Figgins just got the head coaching job, and he was at, I think, St. Anne Pacelli, and he actually was the tight end at Georgia when I was there. So I'm going to try to get him on the show tomorrow.
Really?
But the thing about Bruce, that was before the days where UGA really used their tight end a lot, but he was so physically gifted. He ended up playing a little bit, but during practice, he'd sometimes go on the scout team. He was so big he could go on the offensive defensive line, and then he got a chance to play in the NFL despite not having the best stats. And so I don't know. I think it's great to see, but shout out to Bruce Figgins.
Is his first head coaching job?
Yes, he was assistant head coach at St. Anne Pacelli. So let's see when it became official. One second, guys. So he is now at Chattahoochee County. So this is his first job. So that's exciting.
And then in terms, real quick, Craig, because you say you went to school with him, in terms of character, just what kind of culture they kind of get in, just as far as character and what he brings to the table.
So yeah, that's what I tried to sum up. So you have a guy he had all the physical gifts, but he was unselfish, didn't complain about not getting the opportunities he could have at tight end, still caught some touchdowns, made plays, was willing to do all the work, and then still got an opportunity to play at the NFL. So one, I think the coaches are going to see a guy where you better listen to him, but he's also very humble and has played a lot of different positions. So he's a Georgia guy, NFL experience, was a assistant head coach last year. Now he's getting this big opportunity.
No doubt. Well, let's keep it going on that topic. The latest coaching changes. Manchester officially hired their new head coach. Stephen Holmes officially has stepped down, accepted the Pike County job. They got the hiring of DeMonte Prather, who has a really good history. I did a story on him this past week or last week. And what stands out is he's really good defensively, especially with defensive backs. He's had a numerous of guys that made all SIAC conference when he was there at Fort Valley State. He's originally a Manchester alum, which is super cool. And his defense this past season pitched 5 shutouts, 8 of those 14 games, 7 points or less, with an average of 9.42 points per game. And I don't know who headlined, but a really good defense, and excited to see him get his opportunity.
Yes. So I think with that's going to be Class A Division II again. Those teams that dominated last year, they aren't going anywhere. And if you remember, Manchester ended up beating Bowden in the regular season, lost the rematch. But I had Kurt Williams on the show last week. He's at Macon County. That's another team that he was formerly at Macon County. He was at Lanier County last year. He's going back to replace Dexter Copeland. They were 10-3 last year. So I think all those teams, then you add Slide County into the mix. These are teams that have some of the best recruits in the entire state playing down at the Class A Division II level. And as I said, they aren't going anywhere. They are going to be just as dominant. And all these coaching moves comes with familiarity and a heavy coating of defense on it.
No doubt about it. I mean, that's how you kind of want it. We see that a lot on the high school level. Defensive coaches getting hired to kind of shore up some things. So I think Manchester knocks it out the park. Be interesting to see what kind of staff he ends up hiring, as far as just, the coordinators, do they stay in place, who he tries to bring in to kind of supplement the staff. But he also forgot to mention, he was a finalist for Parker Resources Assistant Coach of the Year. And he also was SICA Player of the Year when he was playing in school. So he is been doing his thing. And he also, ironically, he was the head basketball coach too at Manchester before getting the official football job.
Yep, and they actually went really far in basketball as well. And then another one, and I actually am going to have him on the show tomorrow. This is Zach Slaney at Kings Ridge, and this is also his first ever head coaching job. And he comes from Holy Innocents. And if you saw what they've done these last few years under Coach Winter, they were really competitive in Class 4A, making historic runs to the quarterfinals. They had one of the best defenses in terms of turnovers. They ran a great triple option. So he has experience at Pace Academy. He coached at the Heritage School, which was a GIA school, and they ended up winning state. He was the head coach in their All-Star game, and now he's taking over for Terry Crowder, who led Chattahoochee to a state title, led really good Creekview teams, and so he's taking the reins from them. I'm excited to see what he's going to have to say.
No doubt about it. And then from what you've seen, Craig, just talk a little bit about Kingsridge before you come into the program. How historically has that been as a program for them? Are they kind of a perennial playoff team? Like, how does that program usually kind of operate?
Yeah, with them, I mean, they're just solid across the board.
Gotcha.
Those Metro Atlanta private schools, it is so competitive, and you really have to be able to sell the bill of goods. It's if you're gonna get good football players to come to your school, you've got to be able to win. And Kings Ridge has been able to do it. They're obviously great at baseball too, basketball, all the different sports. But hiring Terry Crowder, a guy that won a state title when Chattahoochee was at the top of the top, and a couple of the guys he coached, I forgot the quarterback's name. He ended up going to the NFL. He coached Quentin Bowling, UGA, Cincinnati
Wow.
Bengals. That was Terry Crowder. And so when I see Kings Ridge hiring one of the most successful coaches in the state, they take football seriously, and I think that's as much as you can say about Kings Ridge.
No doubt about it. And then another big one, and I'm sure you got more, Craig, but Westlake, hires Morris Mitchell. I know he's one of the younger head coaches coming in, but a really good hiring from within the program. I thought it was big time for them. Losing Rico Zachary, who moved on to East Carolina, but I think this is a great hire. I think they could kind of keep familiarity with some of their star players on both sides of the ball, and a guy that really knows defense. So I think this was a kind of knocking out the park hire for them, and then staying within the program as well. I think it's going to have a big residual effect on the players.
Absolutely. And let's think about Westlake for a second. Some of these big 7A powerhouse programs that have been knocking on the door. Mill Creek they got their state title. Milton got their first. And as we said a couple months ago when it happened, that was the longest any team had gone playing football before they won it, over 60 years, I think. Westlake's knocking on the door. They've got all the athletes. I was covering track and field. If you remember last year, they swept the state titles. All those guys were underclassmen. So they have the size up front. They have the speed. I think Westlake, though, they need to come out with a chip on their shoulder this season. 100%.
I kind of like that. Yeah, I 100% agree with. Do you think from the past few years, and I know I've talked to some of your coaches and they said they've been close. Do you think it's more so, is it just not being able to close out games? Do you think it comes from the quarterback position, maybe him not playing up to par? Because I've always had great athletes and good running backs and good DBs. But what do you think it is kind of preventing them from taking that next step that Mill Creek has recently?
Yep, you can tell it's just not fully clicking. And so heading into last season, because Rico Zachary, they've had a lot of coaching turnover. Bobby May goes to Cal. Rico Zachary comes in. Now they're going to have another new coach. But before the season started, there's so many good teams in 7A. I remember I was looking at them potentially at a number 10 spot. We had Coach Zachary on. He was going through the list of commits, and I was like, wait a second. They've got about senior and junior class, about 20 guys with offers. So I think it's there. But Mill Creek, what did they do so well that season? They shared the ball extremely well. They played complementary football. They're good in all three phases. It's just going to take concerted effort, but also I just think playing with a chip on their shoulder, not taking any game for granted, because they have had some lopsided victories in region play. I mean, it was between them and Carrollton in the last two seasons. So they've got to take every single week seriously. They're going to continue to challenge themselves early in the season, which is a great sign. I just think it's an eye on the prize and really setting that goal. And I mean, it takes a lot of pouring your heart and soul into it to win a 7A state title, but that's a team that does have the talent to do it.
Yes, they do. And the good thing is we'll probably get this chance to see them when it comes to 707. And I 100% agree with you, Craig. When you told me back last year, you said usually the 707s can tell you a lot about a team if they're going to go kind of far. A lot of people don't consider it a real football, But you made a really great point. Is continue to stick with me just of how good a team plays. Usually that means the kind of year they're going to have. And I want to throw that to you just real quick before we go to the next
Yes,
coaching changes.
I know exactly where to go with it.
Yes, I want to throw it to you and just your thoughts on that and why that is the case.
Peachtree Ridge.
You said it.
100%,
Yes.
because you
Yes.
were high on them, but seeing them in person,
Mhm.
and actually, I talked to Drew Butler, who kicker, UGA, Pittsburgh Steeler. He was at the Lakeside Hall of Fame this weekend, and he went to Peachtree Ridge, and he's talking about how good of a season they had. And I told the story of the 7-on-7. I said we were talking with Norcross's offensive coordinator. Norcross, North Gwinnett, and Peachtree Ridge tied for first place in that region. They beat the crap out of Peachtree Ridge that previous year, and they went into that matchup confident at the 7-on-7. Peachtree Ridge beat Norcross by the widest margin we saw the entire tournament. It was like 42-7 in a shortened game, and you knew right there they had the playmakers. They came up a little short this year, but we saw it that day. I mean, they had the guys in the secondary. They were all underclassmen, and so not only did we get a glimpse into what they were going to produce this upcoming season, but we knew they're going to be solid the next few years.
Yeah, and then real quick, last point on that, I want to get your thoughts too, because I remember now I was really fresh on. I might have been like a month, maybe 2 months in, but I remember Creekside. I think they ended up winning it that year prior at Roswell Area Park, if
Yes,
I'm not mistaken. And then they ended up going on they lost in the semifinals.
Warner
But
Robins at Heartbreaker.
yeah, so like talk about that one, like when you knew that team was going to be potentially elite as well.
Yeah, if you go and look at our 7-on-7 winners for Corky Kell, Marietta won it. They ended up winning state that year. Colquitt County, when they won back-to-back state titles, they won it both years. So it's about 50-50. The team that wins it ends up going and winning a state title that year, because it takes a quarterback. But in order to win it, you're playing like 15 different games. You got to come out every single matchup, and we're gonna have more teams in it this year. But a team that also came very close last year in the 7-on-7 was Parkview. They ended up having some injuries, Mill Creek, but also Walton. They lost on a BS 2-point conversion call, and they could have won it.
No doubt about it. Yeah. So that's always stood out to me, man. I love the 7-on-7s. Craig is spot on with it when he talks about it. That's why I wanted to bring that point up. And it's gonna be exciting this year. We got 4 days. That'll be at Georgia Tech, so it'll be a lot of fun seeing who comes out on top. Cedar Grove, I think, was a semifinalist this past year, far as in the 7-on-7, and end up winning it all. So usually it's a good kind of, I won't say it's a full onset kind of barometer, but it's a good kind of picture to see what's going to happen, which teams are going to be pretty elite the next year. So we wanted to point that out.
And another great point that we'll get to see firsthand. A lot of these big time powerhouses are going to be bringing in new starting quarterbacks, and that's the
First
key.
look.
Yep.
Yeah, it
It
is.
is the true first look.
Yes.
And these are guys. Some of them are going to be transfers, and I mean, we see some receivers and DBs and linemen transfer, but quarterbacks transfer a lot too.
Yes, they do.
And that's a big opportunity for them. And not to mention, Georgia Tech was offering guys on the spot last year.
Man, that was off the chain, bro.
Yeah.
I just remember saying that, like, this is like so big for the kids, because like if you don't have an offer, if you're really unknown, you go out there, we ball out that day, offer on the spot.
Yep. Still don't know why Dylan Williams didn't pick up that offer.
Yeah,
the Roswell receiver,
because he was balling.
Yeah, he was,
no doubt. But I'll throw it back to you, Craig. What other big hires have you seen across this week? It seems like it's been so many.
Yeah, it really has. This week specifically, hold up, let me pull this up. Who did I just have on? Well, we've mentioned Stockbridge's Thomas Clark going to Jackson. We'll see how he does there. One sec. I've looked at this list so many times, but it's always just like 1 or 2 changes. Westlake was huge this week. Oh yeah, Earthwind Moreland got hired at McDonough to replace Rodney Cofield. He's got plenty of head coaching experience, so that's one of the ones we've been waiting to see filled. Trey Porter at Howard replacing Paul Carroll. Looks like there's about 7 left, but still waiting on Cedar Grove.
Yeah, Cedar Grove is going to be one. Like I said, make sure y'all follow us. Like, come back to the show every Tuesday. We're going to have the live, um, unveil of that and just a live reaction to who Cedar Grove hired because that's a big one. Staple School in DeKalb County, and the hire is going to have a lot to say on some of the kids that play there. I definitely think so. If kids are going to transfer out or they're going to stay there, because I mean, you lose a staple coach like, a John Adams, that definitely does a lot. But it's going to be interesting to see kind of what happens.
Yep. And then a coach that is entering his second year, I had him on the show this last week. That was Jeff Phillips, the former North Springs head coach.
Mhm.
He actually did a really good job at Campbell year one. They made the playoffs, first time in a long time. And if you look at his resume, I mean, he was winning state titles in Tennessee, up in that Chattanooga area. So watch out for Campbell this upcoming season. Saw it with Osborne last year. They were the real deal. Ended up earning a 4 seed, so they got matched up with a pretty tough opponent in the first round. But I mean, they beat Kennesaw Mountain, they beat Cherokee, played Wheeler close, they played North Cobb close for the first half. So I think Campbell, Osborne, they have semi-new coaches. Osborne will have a new coach, but watch out for them.
There you go. Well, those are all of the coaching changes. Like I said, we'll have them locked here. So make sure you tune in every Tuesday at noon. We'll have the latest on that. But Craig, we gotta get to the big news, man. I kind of seen it coming. We talked about it last week on our college segment with what Clemson was able to do in their big recruiting weekend, and they officially, Craig, got a commit this past week. 4-star Tay Harris officially committed yesterday to the Clemson Tigers. What's your instant reaction, Craig?
I think this season he will be Cedartown because they aren't afraid to play their guys both ways in every facet. He will be Cedartown's KJ Bolden. He's going to
That's
return
a bold
kicks.
take.
Yeah, he's going to return kicks. He's going to catch touchdown passes. He's going to rush for touchdowns and watch out for him in the secondary. And he's also going to bring the hammer. I think he is every single snap, every single phase, and he is going to be the most special impact player on the field every single game this season.
And say that quote one more time. You said Cedartown's
KJ Bolden.
Cedartown's KJ Bolden. That is a bold take. I like that though, Craig. I'm not gonna lie. For me, I kind of seen it coming. It just made a lot of sense, especially like I said with their big weekend. They had so many players. Him, Samari Smoke Matthews from North Carolina. They had Zealous Hicks, another one. And from what players were saying, they really were blown away by what Clemson could offer. And then you got to look about this, guys. Think about this connection. Nobody's probably talking about Khalil Barnes, formerly of North Coney. Cedartown is not that far from there. No, I'm sorry. No, Norfolk Coney is in Athens. That's my bad. But he's been recruiting him very, very, very heavily. We've seen them two teams match up a lot in the playoffs. And I think it's real interesting. And what Clemson has going for it is, as you said, you think he's going to play all over the field, can come down, drop the hammer, has exceptional ball skills. The cool thing about it is these young DBs, like they're playing early at Clemson. You go look at Avion Terrell, you go look at Khalil Barnes, you go look at Shelton Lewis. All these players were playing, and then you got a guy, by the time Tay Harris gets there, he's going to be a staple already. And Khalil Barnes, who got a lot of playing time his freshman year, he's going to be in his junior year by the time he gets there. And then you're going to have that connection there where you have that good relationship. It just makes sense. Like if you want to go play, especially at the DB position, cornerback, safety, whatever, that's the kind of place to go. And it just makes sense. He just fits into like their program and what they want to do.
100%. Cedartown produces the toughest guys. They kill it in the weight room. He's all-state level track. He played significant roles as a sophomore when they made it to the finals, lost by a yard. Last year, they replaced probably 18 starters, and he was their go-to guy in every single phase. And it's the pass breakups, it's the pick sixes, the big-time hits. He's all over the field, and we saw him in the All-Star game. No one wanted to throw to him at all. They did not want to throw to him except one time, and he nearly picked it, would have taken it to the house. So I think he's definitely going to get his snaps this upcoming season, and he has all classification potential.
Yes, he does. So, guys, that's what we got on that. That is the reaction officially to Tay Harris. I'm sure he will be in that conversation for some of them awards. Again, we have that big award show right after the state championship. So it'll be interesting to see who gets on that list to be voted on by Georgia Athletic Coaches Association, as well as I'm sure some people here at Score Atlanta. So it's going to be really intriguing to see who gets on that list. Miss Georgia Football, Mr. Georgia Football, and many, many more awards. So can't wait to see how that happens. Speaking of Georgia Athletic Coaches Association. Craig, you had a great story on StoryTale.com that talked about them actually denying and not wanting a June signing day. So what is your thoughts and reaction to that?
Yeah, one, it was interesting to see what I viewed as a rare statement. When was the last time they came out and made a statement like that? And then they were encouraging other states. So I think that shows that Georgia feels like it has a lot of clout in the high school coaching realm, which they do. They have the highest paid coaches. They have uh, number one recruiting areas in the country. But I don't necessarily think they had the best argument
Mm,
because they talked about the reclassification issue, which would impact 0.001% of the players. I don't think that's going to be an issue. Um, I think at the end of the day, these coaches feel like it's already tough these last few years with the addition of early signing day. Then you add in the transfer portal, and now a third one. They view June as a sacred month where that's when their team's gearing up for camp. It's really a coach's or a teacher and educator. It's their only month technically off. So I think they just are like, seriously, another thing we have to do. I think that's
right.
the biggest complaint.
Interesting. Okay. Great take by you, Craig. Yeah, my thoughts on it is I definitely can see where they're coming from. Not wanting to have that extra day. And then, like I said, when you in that June period, you kind of gearing up towards the season. You're going to be in the camp period, yes, but July, like you start getting ready. It's pretty soon after you have practice and padded practices and things like that. So it's almost like another thing, like as Craig alluded to, that they got to get prepared for. But I agree with the reclassification one. Like you said, it's only going to be a 0.0001%. It's only going to be those like 5-star guys that are trying to roll in early anyway.
Yep.
So it's not going to make that big of a difference. But I think it's intriguing. I feel like they're like one of the only ones that have kind of disputed against it, maybe across the Southeast. Could be wrong. I haven't really seen a lot from other states, but I think it's going to be interesting to see kind of how it shapes out. And, will it?
Yeah, and that was tabled when they moved the early signing day to the Wednesday after the regular season. That was a no-brainer move. Um, but here's the thing with this whole discussion about NIL and stuff. It's like in this statement, they say things like, this is bad for the game. It's like, explain why. Like, what
It's a
is
good
your
point.
reasoning? And I'm sick of that being the article or the argument every single time. It's like, no, this is good. This is bad. What are the reasons it's good or bad? Early signing day. How is a kid signing in June? How does that negatively impact the game? You have to bring a concrete example.
I love that. I think a lot of time you get that kind of language too, Craig.
Yeah.
Like they're not very specific. It's just very broad language, and you have to kind of assume or assert what they're trying to say. As you said, if there's a problem, use it with an example and kind of prove your point. I 100%
Yeah,
agree.
if you think that them signing early is going to be a problem because they're going to be um, basically obligated to stick with um, that signing before a season, or if you think it's enticing them to maybe jump the gun on the recruitment, say that. But it's like all that said was the reclassification thing, and that's a weak argument.
100%. Well, that's our thoughts on that, guys. We're going to keep it moving. Got one more topic to talk about before we move to our college segment. And that was another big commitment from Langston Hughes. Should have it pulled up. Give me, guys, 1 second on that. And same thing. I kind of seen this one kind of coming. All right. So, boom. Here it is. Going to share the screen with y'all. All right, so as official from On3 Recruits, as you can see, 4-star offensive tackle Tavaris is committed to Auburn. There's your graphic right there. And I'll start this one. I think it's a good fit for them. Obviously, what's the kind of upside for him is that he can still grow into his body and what he can be. And I think he's going to be even better. I mean, he practices very hard. He has good body weight. He can move and maul defenders. And I think he has a strong potential. And if you guys want to get the full kind of synopsis of it, go to scoretell.com. Hayden had a great story on it. Him officially committing, so you can go read that. But I just think he fits the kind of Auburn kind of feel, right? And they were one of his top schools. He was on with Duke the Scoop of On3, and he said like it's one of the top schools, and you knew he was kind of close to shutting it down. But think about this. Auburn's kind of the same thing as Clemson. Clemson DBs, okay, hey, I got a chance to potentially play early. And if a recent example, Craig, I'll throw out there for you. Connor Liu of Kennesaw Mountain went there, was a all SEC type player in his first season as a freshman for the Auburn Tigers, and is now a starter for them going into next year as well. So when you have that potential and you know what they can produce at Auburn at the offensive line position, you feel pretty good about it. And as he said in that interview with Duke, he's always felt at home with them. They've always treated him as a priority. So I think they get in a very strong offensive tackle or offensive lineman that can really help the group.
Absolutely. And they describe him as a first off the bus player. What does that mean? It means you look at him, you can size up the entire team, and you said, that's the guy. That's the guy that's going to be the best at his position, the meanest on the field. He transferred to Hughes last year from Tri-Cities, so he's entering year 2. He protected one of the best quarterbacks in the country last year, so I think he's going to be ready to go.
I think he is too, and I think Auburn fans, you should be excited. I know some have had questions and it's been like, oh, well, what about his size? But I'm telling you guys, him and also Dontrell Glover is they are staples on the offensive line for Langston Hughes, and as Craig alluded to, they protected one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Rarely got sacked. Those guys are the real deal, man.
Yeah, I think he played basketball too.
Yes.
Yeah, you're playing basketball at Hughes. That's, as I said, that's like playing basketball at Wheeler or playing baseball at Parkview.
Yeah.
You got to be good to be on that roster.
Yes, you do. But, Craig, before we move on, did you have any other major news you wanted to hit on the high school ranks?
Nope, let's go to the college.
All right. So, second segment, let's go to college, man. We're going to start with a big-time quote. I thought it was pretty cool. Let me see if I can share my screen with you guys and pull it up officially. But it's pretty big. Sports Center and actually ESPN actually picked up the quote as well. But it was officially from Dogs HQ. So let's see if I can find it, guys. One sec. Boom. There it is right there. Let's share that screen. All right. Boom. So there you go. Officially from Kirby Smart. As I said, pretty big. Sports Center college game. They picked it up. As you see, they quoted and attributed to Dogs HQ on 3. If a kid doesn't play his senior year because he signed, I don't really want him on my team. Officially from Kirby Smart. Craig, I see you looking at me. What is your reaction to that?
What I like about Kirby's quotes in the last month is he is really breaking the narrative. He's also said things like, I think the most fair system is we should allocate scholarships for some players and then NIL ones for other guys. And if you're an NIL guy, we're allowed to cut you. So he's really like putting out contrary visions for college football this time. And I think he's kind of getting ahead of the game with that quote.
And before we analyze the quote more, what do you think about that if that was to be kind of initiated, like kids specifically have scholarships, and then obviously, the creme de la creme has NIL deals, but you can get cut kind of like similar to NFL. If you're not performing up to snuff with that deal, they can let you go. You have to find a new school. What's your thoughts on that?
Is the full context of that, is he saying guys that skip like LT Overton or guys that reclass?
No, I think he means guys that, let's say, for example, I'm trying to think of a recent example. I think he's talking about guys that, let's say they're going to enroll early, they don't play their senior year at all.
So they jump forward.
Like, so let's say a guy, let's say he's supposed to be a 26. He jumps up to a 25 and doesn't play his senior year at all.
EJ Colson. Wouldn't that technically?
Yeah, that kind of would apply, yeah.
Who? Would that be tough because we won a state title?
Yes.
Yeah. I think what this does is just shifts the conversation a little bit, gets people to talk about, is this actually the smarter move? I think it's crazy that kids want to jump forward a grade. When you look at high school football in the past, the advantage was getting held back a year to try to get your opportunity. So it takes a special player to be able to do that. As we said, 0.01%. But sure, teams would be happy to pick them up. But I do think it's important. That senior year of high school is really important. And what positions are going to be most willing to do that? I mean, a running back, I don't think anyone besides a quarterback is going to have enough clout to be able to get away with that.
No, I 100% agree. Like you said, I think it's going to take a generational talent. I know I had a few people ask me like, "Oh, what about Juju?" I was like, "Well, that's different. He
He was
reclassed,
already held back a year.
yeah, but he reclassed, and then on top of that, he's going to play senior year. So those are two different things. He's not sitting out or not going to play at all. Like he's actually going to play. So those are the differences. But I mean, I don't really have a problem with what he said because, like you said, it's not a big percentage of kids that are doing that.
No, but I think the most intriguing thing he has said was that proposal, because I joked that the NIL and transfer portal, it's like pretty soon everyone's going to be a walk-on. You can just get cut. And then let's say you are a scholarship player and you have all these NIL things tied up in the school. Let's say you screw up, you get in trouble, you get kicked off the team. What happens to it? It's like, how are they signing these commitments and contracts with these deals if it's not set in stone, if they're even going to stay there for 3 years? That's what I don't get. But he's having that interesting proposal saying, what if we have 25 to 30 guys that are scholarship guys? They're guaranteed to be in the program 2 to 3 years. And then we have all the NIL guys. He's trying to break up the conversation and divide a line between the scholarship guys and the guys that are just looking for the place where they can play immediately and make the most money.
It's a good point. I mean, I think it's going to be interesting to see how it continues to pan out. But another great quote by Kirby, like you said, contrary to belief, he's on a different level, and he's his different beliefs than what we see out there from other coaches. And I love it. He's kind of being not trying to do it, I think, but he's kind of being kind of a trendsetter in the industry, I think.
Yeah, because I mean, there's some coaches that are still having like the same gripes that we were having like 5 years ago, where they're just talking about how it's changing the game. It's like, well, we know that.
What are you gonna do about it?
Yeah, exactly. So he's really playing the contrarian role. He's cutting through the conversation and he's shifting it.
That he is. And speaking of the Bulldogs, we'll continue to go with our Georgia segment. What is the latest you're hearing, Craig, from around Georgia? I know they've been having their spring practice, but what stood out just in the press conferences going on with the program?
I think the thing that stands out most this offseason, can't remember ever seeing it before. When have you seen a college football team where the number one story is that the offensive linemen are losing weight? That's how big all these prospects were. You have guys like Daniel Calhoun, where they're talking about losing 50 pounds, in other cases 70 pounds. This UGA offensive line is so big across the board that the number one story is that they're losing weight. Normally it's the opposite.
That's a good point.
Like, I've never seen that before.
That's a good point. Yeah, and he came down, and obviously we talked to a Georgia insider, and he said that his whole nutrition changed from what he was usually eating, and that kind of brought him down. And he said that he was really dedicated to, basically, wanting to lose the weight and wanting to be able to get, obviously playing time. May not be this year because he's a freshman for Calhoun, but definitely in the future. And I think that's big. I mean, you got guys coming in and are committed to the team. I think that's the biggest thing you mentioned as well, Craig. As far as them losing weight, I think the biggest thing is how committed these guys are to the UGA brand, to the Bulldogs, and wanting to be the best version of themselves.
Absolutely. So, like Nair, it says he's had the greatest loss so far, going down to 396 pounds. And that was a 40 to 50 pound loss. They're heading into the spring, they were averaging like 370 on the offensive line. So these are freshmen, sophomores, young guys that are this big, and now they're leaning down. I think that's going to be a very interesting thing. But as I said, normally you see the opposite. So you guys building up, and they have a special group up front.
Yes, they do. And speaking of offensive line, I have a pretty cool story that's actually happened this past or today. Per Lance McCurley, Kirby Smart said that their new center, who is replacing Cedric Van Pran, who's going to the NFL, the new center, Jarrett Wilson, runs faster than most of the Georgia DBs. He's a really good athlete and an even better person. So what is your reaction to that? Their new center, going to be wearing number 55, is running faster than some of their DBs. That's kind of crazy.
I think he's guaranteed a position as a long snapper in the NFL if it doesn't pan out. Guaranteed. I'm telling you, he'll be
Yes.
snapping on punts and making tackles, but that's pretty cool.
Yes, it is. I mean, that's going to probably be their new center. So I think you being able to do that and your coach speaking that very highly of you could just goes to show that you're doing your thing.
Yeah, and just look at the trends of the NFL Combine across the board. It was every position group. These guys are getting bigger, faster, and stronger, no doubt.
Yes, they are. So, and I think the latest we heard too is that a couple guys have been standing out. Elias Robinson, KJ Bolden, obviously Calhoun. Some of the standouts so far at the spring practice, and obviously Jacoby's been doing this thing as well, formerly of Cass, over there at the practices. So those are some of the standouts too that we've been hearing from Georgia camp.
Yeah, and it's exciting because more so than I think recent years, they have more transfers coming in, more fresh faces, and that just to be out there in spring, showing up to the new school and making big plays, that is way more exciting in the spring than in last year's where it's like, okay, you won the national title last year, you got returning starters at this position. They aren't really focused on spring. Now it's like you talk about Sokobi, him making a ridiculous catch, KJ making a big play. Spring has to feel a lot more exciting.
No doubt about it. So we'll have the latest on that. Continuing going on with the spring practice, the standouts. Obviously, the game is going to be here, I think, in April. So we'll have all the latest around that. But now we're going to transition to Georgia Tech. They've been having some spring practices and pro days as well. So I think the biggest standout for me has kind of been I talked to a couple of players and they said just the physicality, right? They haven't had any pads or anything, but they've been physical and sets and different drills and practices and things like that. So I think when multiple recruits are saying that about your team, I think that's a good telltale sign. We know that they want to run the football as well as pass it. Had one of the most productive units last year in college football, but I think multiple recruits saying that coming out of seeing their spring practice, I think says a lot.
No doubt. Yeah, last year they had the speed. They can match up on that. What do you think? I mean, offensively, they could score.
Yep.
They won most of those dramatic games through the passing game, but what's the ceiling for the offense this year?
That's a good question. I think their ceiling is you mean far as just rank or do you mean
Yeah,
like
just
how
like
many
in the SEC, like top three. I'm sorry, ACC, top three, top five.
I think of what they have coming back, the emergence of Hayes King, I think they could easily be a top two, top three unit with all of it coming together. Buster Faulkner being back for another year. I think if they can stay like not get complacent and wanting to keep getting better, and that's what Hayes King kind of talked about being consistent, and he wants to be more of a vocal leader this past year instead of just leading by example, but leading with his voice too. I think if you can get Hayes King to play as a top quarterback in the ACC, which I think he's more than capable of, he brings down the turnovers just a little bit, and he continues to air the ball out. They got the weapons, Eric Singleton Jr., right, Malik Rutherford. They got a couple guys coming in, Isaiah Canyon. Be interested to see what the freshman can do. But I think if they can get that good quarterback play, if he can play at an all ACC level, Haynes King, I think they can have a top two offense in the ACC.
I agree. So look at their offense. They have an offense that is capable of coming back in games. They can score quickly, they can erase deficits. Say they add the consistency. Then if defensively, if they can just somewhat match it, they really do have a complete team. Way more so than last year, where they'd have a good half, a bad half. It's like if he can control the pace of the game, keep the ball in their possession, and then the defense can take a next step. I mean, they can be a very tough matchup. And yeah, they definitely have the quarterback who is a dual threat. He can read defenses well and get a lot of guys involved.
Yes, he can. So that's going to be the biggest test. Like I said, I think if they can produce a top 40, top 50 unit defensively, goes back to your point, Craig. I think they could be a very dangerous team and they can, really knock on the door 7-6 last year, can easily go to 9, 10 plus wins this next year and playing possibly, in a college football playoff. I think you need about 10 wins, 10, 11 wins. I think you can get in that spot. So,
Yep, I think Haynes King is playing to be a future NFL quarterback. When was the last time you saw a Tech guy do that?
it's been a long time. So he has all the keys. And I think one more note I want to talk about with Tech before we continue to move on, is that Haynes King said himself he's been very impressed with the freshman quarterbacks and how fast they're picking up the offense. So I think that says a lot. They're going to get to kind of be under him that 1 year, and then they should be ready to go. And as you guys all know, one of the freshman quarterbacks is Aaron Philo, set all the records, surpassing Trevor Lawrence. So when you see guys like that picking it up, I think that's very good. And he also said their bonds is very important between all the quarterbacks. They do a bunch of stuff together. They hang out. It's not just one guy. Like, they try to make sure no guys left behind. So all that stuff matters, man.
Yeah, and look at Aaron Philo. I mean, he did it his junior year, and then replaced every single receiver and did it again with freshmen and sophomores. So if you had any doubts about him, he proved it last season.
Yes, he did.
But before we move on, let's talk about Georgia. I saw they have a new slogan, and it was "Assume Nothing." What does that mean? I'm not sold. Not sold on it. That's like what is it? Hold up. Russia has a slogan that is just. It reminds me of. Let me see what it is. Oh yeah, the new like Russian national slogan. It's "Not Ashamed," and it's like, okay, what are you supposed to be ashamed for? So then it's like, assume nothing. Well, what are people supposed to be assuming? I like take that better. Take that. That's on the offense. Assume nothing as a slogan. What does that mean? He said he picked it up when he was hanging out with Phil Knight, the Nike guy.
Yeah.
But if you asked 100 people what that means, you're going to get 100 different answers.
That's a good point.
So pick a new slogan, guys. Not sold on it.
Craig is not.
They're going to put it on T-shirts. Everyone's going to pretend it's the greatest thing ever, but it makes no sense. Assume nothing.
Assume nothing. That's interesting.
So I'm just going to be the first one to point out that that's a lame slogan.
Well, there you have it. I think Craig brings up a good point. Assume nothing. Craig is not vibing with it. But we'll leave it there, man. We got some other big topics. One I want to talk about, just Clemson officially suing the ACC. It could be the dawn of, major trouble for them. They are in murky waters, already getting sued by FSU, Florida State. And some of the reasoning that they pointed out, one we'll talk about real quick, is the exit fee. So the exit fee to leave the ACC is $140 million, right? You go and compare that to other conferences. The Big Ten is $0, doesn't take anything. Big 12, the amount is equal to revenue distributed to a departing member or departing team for the past 2 years of its membership in the conference. So that would be how you would get out of your agreement there. Then for the SEC, might have one of the more suited ones in addition with the Big Ten. So the SEC, if you give them a 2-year notice, $30 million, $40 million if it's less than 2 years, and if you give them no notice, $45 million. So as you can see, it's an exorbitant amount. For the ACC, $140 million is a lot of money. So that's one of the things they have going on. And then per Clemson, they want the court to rule ACC does not own their broadcasting rights to its games after it leaves the league, the ACC. 2, it is not required to pay the exit fee of that $140 million we just mentioned. And then 3, it owes no other fiduciary duties to the conference. So they are suing the ACC for the ACC grant of rights and enforceability of its withdrawal fees.
Shows who's in charge, because if Clemson left and then got sued, that'd be one thing. But the ACC is holding all the chips, and so Clemson's having to sue them to gain the leverage to leave. And they make a pretty good case, because you got the merger with the SEC, these other networks. It's like, I think they're testing what their leverage actually is.
So you don't think it's, well, I'm not gonna say it's definitely legit.
If they just like left and then they got hit with this exit fee, that's one thing. I think them putting the lawsuit to them, they're trying to see how it's going to play out.
Interesting.
See if they have the freedom to move. See if they can win this one, and then. But no, it's an aggressive move by Clemson, knowing who is holding them back.
Yeah, and then that deal that they're currently in is locked into 2035, 2036. So that's a long time, nearly a decade.
Yep,
pretty much.
So, no, it's a big lawsuit. We will see. But yeah, I mean, teams have changed conferences a lot. So
Yes.
I mean, sometimes it's out of necessity, sometimes just relocating, but them actively trying to leave and then getting hit with the penalty, that's what they're testing.
And then, do you think ACC is in trouble with Florida State suing and then now Clemson?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you look at the SEC and Big 12 right now, and they're becoming their own force within that. I mean, it's already an odd number, Power Five. So if you have two of them together and then three separate ones, they're going to be the little fish, and then yeah. So I mean, they're just trying. Everyone's trying to get in on it.
Yeah, and my last one on this point is, what do you think the ACC needs to do to get up there? We've already seen the revenue sharing model for the college football playoff. I think 54% or 58% for the SEC and Big Ten, as compared to 32% for Big 12 and then the ACC. What do you think they need to do to kind of keep their teams? Because these are marquee programs: Clemson, Florida State. I mean,
the SEC. It's not. They have better TV contracts. They have not every single week of the season is better matchups, but most of them are. So I mean, it's just, are there teams in the ACC that can compete? Of course, but it's just like top to bottom is just not
a comparison.
Yeah, it's not the same product. You can't go like an SEC game. They're playing catch up a little bit.
Yes, they are. Well, that's an interesting point. I agree with Craig. I definitely think they're going to have some work to do, and they're going to have to figure out how they're going to do it. But they definitely are in trouble, and it'll be interesting to see kind of how it all pans out. But we'll keep you updated on that. Last college topic before we wrap. College football is officially set to expand to 14 teams in 2026. So 2 more than now. Obviously, we haven't seen the model yet. We'll see that this year. But what is your reaction to that, Craig?
Well, this model was entirely based off how they split up the revenue between the conferences. So I didn't realize until I was looking at the GACA coaches, who were they addressing this to? And it was the College Commissioners Association. They're the ones that make all the decisions. And it's not just the Power 5 commissioners, it's every commissioner of every conference. And if you look at the 14-team playoff, the entire reason that it went to 14 is so they can give this percent to the SEC and Big 12, this percent to this conference. So what's driving the expansion is just how they divvy up the overall revenue, which is very interesting.
Yes, it is.
And so it's not just 14 teams and it's everyone. It's like the reason it's 14 is because this conference is going to get this much, that one's going to get that much, and they have a better chance of getting in it. And it's a CCA. That is who's making all the decisions.
And do you kind of agree with, obviously how they generate and then sharing kind of the revenue between both?
Yeah, I had it pulled up one sec. Here we go. All right, so here's how it breaks down. The financial distribution for the expected 14-team playoff will look radically different, obviously, from the college football playoffs we've had in the past couple years. It will look different than these next years when we finally have a playoff. But on an annual basis, the Big Ten and SEC will be making, I keep saying Big 12, sorry, Big Ten, more than $21 million per school, a number that is up from the nearly 5.5 the Power 5 leagues are currently being paid. So now they're all getting 5.5. They team up, now they're each getting 21 million. And then the SEC would get around 13 million. Big 12, 12 million.
Mm-hmm.
And Notre Dame is expected to get more than 12 million. So it's all based on changing which conferences are basically picking a better piece of the pie. They're all getting way more money.
That's what it sounds like.
Yep.
Interesting.
And it says the group of 5 schools, the American conferences, Conference USA, MAC, Mountain West, and Sun Belt, their revenue will increase to just under 1.8 million from the current 1.5. So that's still going up, but 5 million to 22 million, that is a big jump.
Yes, it is. Wow. And I guess that number is always the same no matter how many teams come out of the SEC or the ACC or the Big 12 or Big 10.
Yeah, and just think about it. It's all based on the TV contracts that the SEC and Big 10 have.
Got it.
that's where the revenue's coming from. But if you are that important to driving the revenue, don't you think that your team has a better chance of getting into the 14-team playoff? I
Without
think
doubt.
so. Yeah, and they're trying to put that in stone. They're trying to guarantee that their teams get in. Which I mean, hey, be competitive, vouch for your teams, but that alliance,
Yeah.
that is really something we haven't seen.
No. And do you think that's beneficial for college football, or do you think it's harmful? What do you think? Before we move on.
Well, I think it's exciting. I mean, if you have these two juggernaut conferences teaming up every year in the biggest game, I think that's the potential of a new kind of rivalry.
Okay.
Who's the SEC's biggest rival? I think that's what they're trying to be.
Well, there you have it. That's our thoughts on it. We'll obviously keep you locked, but that's the revenue sharing model. That's how it's going to kind of look in a couple of years, and we'll see if it'll be beneficial in the future for college football. But that is how it's looking. Hopefully, we'll see like college basketball, which is starting actually tonight, and then officially the first round will be this weekend: Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But hopefully, we'll get to see some stories like a Group 5 team, like a Coastal Carolina this past season, of Troy making a couple of upsets. That would be kind of intriguing to see a football team do it. Not necessarily I'm gonna say win a title because that's gonna be tough, but if they can make some upsets, make some noise in this expanded playoff, the 12 now to 14, in a couple of years, I think that'd be really exciting.
Absolutely. Before we move on, I do obviously I need to do more research into all that, but it, it's amazing to look at just the fact that you have certain conferences that have such a bigger impact on the landscape. So you don't see that in other sports. It's like sports are usually these conferences, whoever's the best from it, they go in and play, but that's just not the reality. And so, yeah, they're driving all of it.
Yes, they are. And like you said, it's not something we see a lot. Definitely unforeseen, but it's gonna be intriguing to see what happens with it.
For sure.
No doubt. But we're gonna leave that there. We're gonna go to our NFL segment to wrap up the show. Greg, I'm gonna start with you before we talk about the ones we got on the list. What were some big ones you've seen this past week as far as NFL? Obviously, we'll talk about fields and all that in a sec, but was there any other ones that we might not touch on that stuck out to you?
Mm. I mean, I like the Justin Fields one. It was a good week for them. You had his little sister winning Player of the Year for her role for Mount Perrin, and then he finally picks up his big deal with the Steelers, which they desperately needed. I think
That's a
he's
great
the
one.
biggest one. I know you. What do you feel about it?
I'm gonna be honest, man. I mean, as as a Bengals fan, it's tough. I mean, they have upgraded their whole QB room from a D plus to like a B plus, in my opinion. Having Russell Wilson and obviously Justin Fields with even higher potential, and I like it for Fields. That's one of the places he said he wanted to be at, and it just makes so much sense. Now I know that they said per reports that they're going to extend Russell Wilson to a longer term contract. We'll see how it plays. But for Fields, this gives you the opportunity, one, to go behind a really great head coach, right? Go get developed even more so, and to go to a team that has a really great defense. And a lot of times that's how Russell Wilson won his first title, right? He obviously was a good quarterback. It's a great quarterback, but he had an elite defense with the Seattle Seahawks, right? A really good running game. Like that's basically shaping up to what Justin Fields has now, right? Really great running backs, Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, also a really stout, really great defense that won 10 games with subpar QB play with Mason Rudolph, Kenny Pickett, and things like that. So I think it shapes up good for him if he can go in there and compete. Maybe not win the starting job off bat, but if Russell Wilson struggles, you got that opportunity to be their franchise guy going forward. And now, Craig, the good thing is he has all these weapons: George Pickens, Pat Fryermuth. They'll probably try to get another receiver, but they've been in talks with Michael Williams. They've been in talks with different trades for different guys. You also got that pick that they have in the first round to get a receiver in a really deep wide receiver class. So I think when you have all that, I think this is a better situation for Fields overall, and I think Pittsburgh knocked it out the box.
Yeah, and that's a deep quarterback situation, and I think that is that's the model a lot of teams are using. We saw all these old veterans retired the last few seasons, and you look at some of these teams; they have multiple guys capable of legit starting. Where one, it's not as big of a gap as in the past, where the backup's going to come in not be able to do anything. So Jameis Winston, he's got a new home as well. So
Yep.
I think that's how a lot of these teams are making it. You look at the playoffs the last 2 seasons, you've had backups every single time. Um, where you have other programs where or other teams are paying their one starter all this money and then they're missing out.
No doubt about it. What's going on, Jimmy, man? We got an opinion comment, man. We wanted to ask you, man, where you been at? We have not seen you in a long time, man. So what's been up? But he says, what's up, guys? It was basketball season in my house. My stepson, Joshua Selden, played in the 11th grade All-Star game at Albany State last Friday. Congrats to him, man. That's super awesome. I remember when I was around that age, I was playing a lot of All-Star games, man. It's nothing like that experience, being able to travel and go playing big games, man. So we appreciate you always tuning in, man, and being a supporter of us and what we're doing. So thank you so much, man. And congrats also to your stepson, Joshua. But yeah, I want to talk real quick too, Craig. I want to ask you just a little bit about Chicago, right? Now, I think for the most part, it seems like they're going to probably do Caleb Williams. If they don't, it'll be Jaden Daniels. But a lot of people feel like they got fleeced in this trade. I mean, I think so too. 6th-round pick only for Justin Fields, low market. What do you think about them just as a franchise as a whole?
Ooh, well, it completely goes against what I thought was a good strategy you had to keep Justin Fields and draft Marvin Harrison, see how it plays out. So now they're at complete, starting board. I don't know. I mean, they definitely do not have a lot of happy fans right now.
No.
And people are frustrated.
Yeah. And I think it does not help Caleb Williams because think about this, Craig. You're going into a situation where your coach, Matt Eberflus, he has to win. If not, he's fired. Potentially the GM's fired as well. So instead of having a clean slate coming in, like you already have that pressure on you to win kind of as a quarterback and to win 10-plus games and make a playoff berth as a rookie. That's not easy to do. Now, did they get the good talent? Sure. They got, obviously, Keenan, I think his name's Keenan Williams. I'm not blinking his name, from the Chargers coming in. They got DeAndre Swift, right? They got Kevin Byard. So they got the pieces. But my thing with Chicago is why you didn't have those pieces when Fields came in, And that's the part that doesn't make sense. I think if you would have had those pieces, I think they would have been just fine. But what is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, the quarterback hasn't been the missing piece, but exactly what you said. Where's the surrounding talent? Now they lose the quarterback and bring in the surrounding talent. So if they don't come out and start winning games, like the fans are so over it.
Yes.
Where, it's going to be tough, and then it's going to go down to the locker room, go down to the field. These players, they don't want to go out there and get embarrassed. So
no,
they have a tough hill, but maybe the draft will bring them some success. But it does seem like they traded one strategy for another.
Yes, and last point on that, they're in a tough division too. 2 contenders. Detroit's gotten better, right? And you can't sleep on the Packers anymore. They're one of the youngest teams, and look what they were able to do. They could have made the argument. They easily could have been in the NFC Championship game.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think of Swift though? Speaking of that division,
I think Swift's a great pickup for them. I mean, I like it in that division. I know he's not the biggest back, but I think he fits their culture really well. I think he could be a great playmaker. He's a threat outside of the backfield. You could use him on screens and can kind of throw him out. I think he's a good safety blanket for a quarterback in his first year.
How many wins
for Chicago?
6.5.
Yeah, I go like 7 to 8 maybe wins for them potentially. They'll play a weak schedule.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah,
but no, I feel for him. I mean, that's a historic, great fan base, and they just have had some tough, ugly losses.
Yes, and tough at the quarterback too. And I thought they had the guy, but we will leave that there. We got another comment. Jimmy says the Falcons will draft Shadur Sanders next year. I think that's an interesting take. Makes a lot of sense. His dad came out and said he doesn't want to play in a cold weather city. So what do you think of that? I mean, that's a bold take. It does make a little sense because that'll be year 3 or year 2 going into for Kirk Cousins. He's probably going to retire at that 40-year age. He can learn from a veteran, sit for 2 years, and then his dad played here as well. Kind of does make a lot of sense. And you got your future quarterback. What do you think?
Yeah, that'd be cool. I'm down with that idea. not having to play right away necessarily,
Nope.
bringing the excitement. That'd be cool.
I think it would be too. 100% agree with you. Great point, Jimmy.
Prime
Definitely agree with that.
2.0, nice.
Prime 2.0. All right, we're gonna keep it rolling. Chase Young officially signed with the Saints, 1 year, $13 million guaranteed. He goes to their program. What's your thoughts on that, Craig? Got traded obviously from Washington to 49ers, played in the Super Bowl, had a pretty good impact. There's been some negative hearsay about him that he doesn't always give 100% effort. But what's your thoughts on him signing with the Saints?
Oh, the Saints. I mean, they'll be solid. It's just that division, man. I'm telling you, I think the Falcons have it locked up this year. So he'll be fine, but I don't know. I'll take Kirk Cousins over him.
Yeah, I can't disagree. I mean, Chase Young is obviously a great defender, great edge rusher, but yeah, I mean, they got Derek Carr. He didn't have his best season. They traded away, or Jameis Winston left to the Browns on a 1 year deal, $8+ million. Yeah, I think it's going to be tough for him. I mean, they got asset and pieces. They're obviously Chris Olave, Alvin Kamara, Tyrann Mathieu re-signed with them, but I think it's going to be tough. But yeah, I think this is the Falcons' division to lose. I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, all those guys you mentioned, they're all getting super old. I'm allowed to say that, but I mean, yeah, Tyrann Mathieu's got to be pushing 40 at this point. We'll see how they do in the draft. What's the team identity for the Saints? I don't know.
I couldn't even answer that. Yeah, because it used to be like running and you got Drew Brees, but yeah, I mean, you don't know.
Yeah, I 100% agree with Jimmy. The Falcons, I think they have the division on lock. I really do.
Yeah, that's per Jamie says Falcons are a playoff team. Book it. I mean, yeah, it'd be pretty disappointing. I think Falcons, the expectation is playoffs and win a playoff game. I doubt. I mean,
no, I bet Falcons fans right now, the majority say we're making the playoffs, win one game, and then lose. And there's confidence behind that too. So that's good to see.
Yeah, you bring excitement back to the city too.
Yeah, you expect to make the playoffs. You expect to win a playoff game.
Yep.
The first time in a while.
You're in line.
Yeah.
I think this is 2016?
Yeah.
Is that valid? Super Bowl? Am I right, Hayden?
What?
Last time Falcons won a playoff game? Was it 2016 in that Super Bowl?
2017. They beat the Rams.
Beat the Rams. I remember that game. Home game?
No, that was in LA.
You're right. I just thought about it. Yeah, he's right. That was the last one.
Then the Rams, they win the Super Bowl that year?
No, they beat the Rams. They made the Super Bowl the next year.
Gotcha.
There it is. Thank you, Hayden. I know he's big on the Falcons because I didn't know kind of their timeline. But there you go. Since about 2017. So a long time. But they should be in that conversation for sure.
Yeah, 3 head coaches ago. Or 2.
I think so.
Yeah. Unless they had some interims in that time period.
No doubt about
it.
But
no, I'm excited. I think the Falcons are the team to beat this year. I think they have young defense. The defense played really well last year. They've got a good offensive line. That's not a weakness. They have a reliable quarterback, and they have the potential to, now that they have a team identity, actually add exciting pieces in the draft. I think this is the best state they've been in a long time.
100% agree. And speaking of, we might actually, guys, have to do like division crown winners when it comes, obviously, closer to the season in August, going into September. Who we think is going to win into those divisions? I think that'd be an interesting topic for us to debate as well with our picks. Some I'm sure fans will love as well. But that's our thoughts on that. We'll probably end up doing that later on in August, late August, September. But let's talk about Chiefs and Bengals real quick, Craig. Let's start with the Chiefs. So Jerry Sneed, what do you think the likelihood is that he stays with you guys and doesn't get traded?
I think it's good now, and I didn't think that last week. Everyone was saying he was gone. That was the report. That was the news. Then they said it's absolutely not happening, which is crazy. But yeah, it's that good old fashioned or franchise tag, which allows you to talk to other teams, but it also puts you in a pickle. And I think the Chiefs have been willing, outside of the case of Tyreek Hill, to reward their best players. And Sneed, if you look at him last year, single-handedly shut down Flowers in the AFC Championship, We wouldn't have won a Super Bowl without him. And you got to reward guys like that.
Yes, you do. I mean, obviously, we know Chris Jones is your best player, but your two corners are elite. Trent McDuffie from Washington, formerly All-Pro, and then L'Jarius Sneed. That's what made you guys so good defensively last year. They could pretty much lock up the opposing team's best player every time, the wide receiver position. So that's what made you guys elite last year. So seeing and hearing that, I mean, that's obviously a good thing for you guys. And I know you guys don't want to let him go. And like you said, for the most part, you guys reward that.
Yeah, I think it went from 90% he's leaving to 90% he's staying.
Yeah. And you love to see that. For us, it's a little tough. We are going through it. We'll see what happens with T. Higgins, but I know he posted on his story the famous song, "Got Me Locked Up, Won't Let Me Down." So I think it's intriguing. I think it's a good cat and mouse game going on right now.
Receivers are a little different than DBs.
Yeah, that's very true. So as I said, me and Craig been talking about it on air, off air. I think they got a real decision to make, right? Do they ride it out for another year, or do they potentially make a trade to go and get a big receiver, right? Do they, surprise everybody in the draft and trade T. Higgins to maybe a Tennessee or a Jacksonville, move up, and go get a Brock Bowers? Do they do that, or do they go and do one you never seen before? Go trade the 18th pick, T. Higgins, 2024 first round pick, maybe a third round pick to go get Justin Jefferson. I'm not saying these things are going to happen. Obviously, these are just hypotheticals. I'm just throwing these out there, but I think they're going to have a very interesting thing of what they're going to do.
Yeah, I think the most exciting thing would be if you are going to trade him, to do it in the draft with a guy that can help immediately.
Yes.
And because that's what it's all about right now, is the window. That's what's holding them back.
Yes.
But they do have a lot of leverage with him, and they could trade him a lot of different ways.
Yes, they could.
His situation is a little different, but playing with Joe Burrow, a healthy Joe Burrow, that's also a plus.
Speaking of pluses, Craig, before we conclude the show and get your last thoughts on another topic, they just signed Trent Brown, formerly of the Patriots, to a 1-year deal. That was a little bit before we came on air. He was formerly, like I said, of the Patriots. So their back end, their two tackles are big. Listen to the size, Craig. 6'8", about 340 for Orlando Brown, about 6'8", I think 360 for Trent Brown. So obviously he started, I think, in 90 of his 94 games he's ever played. I like the move. It's only a 1-year deal, but I think what it allows is that flexibility. Now you look at the 18th pick, Craig, what we were just talking about, you have a little bit more flexibility, right? If you want to go get a specific position, you can. And I think what's important is nailing that pick. They have to nail the first round this year. It cannot be a project. No disrespect. I know he went to Clemson. He's a great player here at Hillgrove, Miles Murphy. But they cannot have a project in year. You need a starting, contributing player at the 18th pick. And whether they decide to go offensive tackle or they decide to go defensive tackle, they got to hit on that position. And what's so cool is, signing Brown, I'll throw it to you, Craig, you can get a guy like a J.C. Latham from Alabama, a Marius Mims from Georgia if he's still there. And they can learn from a pro. And then if you don't want to re-sign Trent Brown, you can have him go into the starting position that next year.
Yeah, very smart. And so you lose some of your depth from the running back position, and then you bolster the offensive line.
Yep.
It's a very smart move.
Yes, it is. And the crazy part of what we're doing, Craig, is very similar to, I'm sure you've seen it, but what Indianapolis is doing or did within the Peyton Manning era and also Tom Brady. Like, they never had a staple running back out after Edgerrin James for the Colts. Patriots, Kevin Falk. They had so many guys. James White. And I think that's the philosophy that they're picking up now, and that, they're a passing offense, and they just need guys that are, speed, can add a lot of, velocity, agility. It can get to the spot, one cut, kind of do their thing. So their offensive game plan has kind of changed now.
Yeah, you don't need a superstar back that's getting paid the most money in the league if you have a lot of weapons, a quarterback that can throw it on fourth down or run it if you need to. I think that it opens them up, and the Bengals have not had the luxury of a rock-solid offensive line.
No, we have not. But hopefully this draft, they'll add some more depth and add some pieces. And Jamie asked who has the 18th pick. We do. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do. Cincinnati Bengals do. So I think it's really intriguing. But we will keep it locked and keep you guys updated on that. Before we wrap, Craig, was there any other major news that you've seen in the free agency realm?
Ooh, I was looking at this list. Let's see. I know the Giants just made a splash. Who was that one about?
I think somebody whispered Brian Burns. I think we talked about that last week. 5 years, $87 million.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the big one.
Who wins that division?
Such a good point. I think it's Phillies to lose. Yeah, I think it's Phillies to lose. When you go out and you get a Saquon Barkley, who is a multifaceted and versatile running back, he can do a lot of things well, and then you go and get a C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who was very instrumental in you making that Super Bowl run 2 years ago, and you bring him back to the team, and then you go get Devin White from Tampa Bay on a 1-year, $7.5 million deal. I think things like that, like you're trying to go back into where you were at. So it's going to be a lot of pressure on this team, a lot of pressure on the offensive coordinator that they just got, Kellen Moore. So I think it's Phillies to lose. Obviously, real quick on Dallas, they just converted Dak Prescott into a $5 million signing bonus. They've lost some pieces, added some pieces, but I think it's their lose. The Cowboys, to me, they got to have an elite draft. Because I think right now, like they're gonna have to pay CeeDee Lamb, they're gonna have to pay Micah Parsons. You're gonna have to eventually pay Dak Prescott. You can't pay everybody, so I think it's Philly's division to lose. What about you?
I think it will be more competitive than it has been. I could see Dallas maybe winning the division.
Interesting.
But then Eagles still they had some real problems at the end of last season.
Yes, they did.
Yes, they did. Yeah, they've definitely gotten better than where they left it last year, but we'll see. I think can't count Dallas out.
Our guy Craig is high on Dallas.
Well, just to produce a record, I think.
No doubt. I'm just messing with you. No, Craig's right. Can't sleep on Dallas. We'll see what they do, but for me, I think it's Phillies to lose. Obviously, they had some chemistry issues. Lost, obviously, Jason Kelsey, Fletcher Claus are retired, but now it's going to be I think also to the last point, Craig, is the young guys got to step up now. The Nolan Smiths of the world, Jordan Davises of the world, Jalen Carters of the world, Nakobe Dean, if he can finally stay healthy. All that is going to matter in the turnaround of this team and if they can get back to where they were.
Yep, 100%. Defense has to step up too.
Yes, they do. But I think that's going to wrap it. You had any other thing?
No, that's it.
That's it. So, guys, thank you for tuning in. Jimmy, as always, man, we appreciate you being a loyal supporter and tuning into our show, man. Love to see more of you. We'll be back live next Tuesday at noon for Underrated and Overlooked Podcast. Thanks for right now. Craig, who you got on tomorrow?
Kingsridge.
All right, so Craig will have on Kingsridge, head coach on the high school level tomorrow at noon, drive for the GSSA state title. So tune in then, and we'll see you guys soon. Thanks again for tuning in.